There we go. Okay, good morning, Sheriff Bob Peryam. I just want to say to you, thank you for joining me on the Zoom to talk about jails, financial issues with jails, and all that. As you know, Houghton County is facing the need to upgrade its jail, and it's important for the voters of Houghton County to be able to ask questions and debate among ourselves how to address this issue in 2025 and forward. So thanks again for agreeing to meet me over Zoom.
Yes,
Um,
good morning. It's an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to have the opportunity to be a part of this process.
yes,
An extremely important process, I might add.
great. For the audience, my name is Faith Morrison, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country. We're doing public meetings, outreach over the internet, tours of the jail, and whatever we can think of to increase public awareness of the state of the Houghton County Jail and the issues around building a new Houghton County Jail on Sharon Avenue in the city of Houghton. I first saw Sheriff Bob Peryam speak on the subject of jails at the first meeting of the Houghton County Jail Committee back on October 30th, 2024 in Franklin Township Hall. Many of us at that meeting felt that and continue to feel now that it would be very helpful if more folks could hear Sheriff Peryam's views on upgrading, renovating, building jails, since he speaks of with actual experience. And he's a Youper. So that's the background of this video. So let's get right to it, Sheriff. Can you just please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I can, yes, absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Bob Peryam. I was born and raised in Hancock, Michigan. Went to Hancock High School and graduated from Hancock High School. I went through the police academy a long, long time ago at Northern Michigan University. And my biggest connections, I think, to the Houghton County Sheriff's Office is my father actually worked there. He worked at the sheriff's office and the courthouse as a custodian. And in fact, I'm sorry to say, at a very young age, he actually died there.
Good.
And another connection is my mother was born and raised right across the street from the Sally Port of the Houghton County Sheriff's Office. So if you want to know if I'm actually from Houghton County and the city of Hancock, I don't think anyone has any more deeper roots than I have.
You could pass a quiz on that, right?
Absolutely pass a quiz on that.
And the Sally Port is sort of the garage entrance to the Houghton County Jail facility.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Right across the street from that, a big house right on the corner. That's where my mother was born and raised, and she actually went to high school with Sheriff Brian McLean's father.
Okay.
So we have connections all the way back, and my father and my family had connections all the way back with the sheriffs, to Sheriff Fred Paulson, to Sheriff Smith, to Sheriff Johnny Wheatman, to Sheriff Rutzela, to Sheriff McLean. So I've got a long history with the sheriffs and the sheriff's office.
And I'm going to just bet that you're maybe the only person who could list that many Houghton County sheriffs.
Probably so, yes, ma'am. Well, other than the sheriff himself, perhaps.
And other than the sheriff himself. So you went to school in Northern for this, and then how did you come to be a sheriff?
So I went to Northern Michigan University, to the police academy there, and I actually, believe it or not, I was a police officer at the South Range Police Department, and they're the ones that paid for and sent me to the academy under a federal state grant back in those days that would pay for people to go to the police academy. And so I worked there at the South Range Police Department as a patrolman. And but then, unfortunately, due to the economy, the police department went away. And they contracted with the Houghton County Sheriff's Office. But back in those days, if I made an arrest, I would bring them to the Houghton County Jail. And it's sad for me to tell you this, but the Houghton County Jail has not changed one bit from the over 40-something years ago that I was bringing prisoners there to today's date.
Wow.
Looks exactly the same, other than wiring hanging from the ceiling.
Right, right. Which is how they have added more modern things, is hanging wiring from the ceiling.
Which, of course, in today's society, you have to have computer systems and
Yep.
upgrade
Absolutely.
technology. You have to have those things.
Absolutely.
That
And then,
jail and that building is not capable of even doing some of the things that should be able to do.
yeah. And then you found yourself a sheriff's job in Florida, is it? Or ran for sheriff?
Yes, No, well, I eventually ran the sheriff, but I actually got hired by the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, which does law enforcement and corrections from the city of Key West all the way up to Miami.
Mhm.
I started there as a young deputy and worked my way up through the ranks in all the different districts and divisions, and then ran for sheriff and was blessed enough to win the elections, and I became the sheriff of Monroe County, and did that up until the date that I retired. And
There you go.
when I retired, I then got picked up by the executive office of the president, and I am assigned to the ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, as the executive director of North Florida HIDA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, for North Florida and South Georgia. And specifically, we work on major drug trafficking issues, money laundering issues, violent crimes, gangs, guns, and sex trafficking.
Wow. How many years were you sheriff?
I was a sheriff for 4 years.
4 years.
And with the sheriff's office for 35 years.
35 years. Wow. And then the part that's really relevant to the Houghton County question is that you had the experience of having a lawsuit that was lost by the county and the repercussions of that. So can you tell me about all that?
Yeah, it was the gift that kept on giving. It was a 30-year nightmare that for whatever reasons we couldn't get it to go away. So we had some serious issues with our jail, and I readily admit we really did have. And we had overcrowding issues. We had issues with people getting sick in our jail because of poor ventilation, and the list went on and on and on. So what happened eventually is someone filed a lawsuit against us, and they did it through the civil rights violations, a 1983 civil rights violation. And so then the federal government stepped in. When the federal government came in, the first thing they did was do an inspection of our jail and look at our processes and how we were doing. And the conditions were so horrible that they were close to shutting us down, which thank God they didn't, because our jail, albeit larger than Houghton County, had the same issues that Houghton County has today. And so for us to be able to start housing out 500 and 600 prisoners would have been extremely difficult. But we had to start immediately with some repairs that they ordered us to do. They didn't ask us to do them. They ordered us to do them and told us to do them. And then they did constant inspections on us. And we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in just trying to get the jail to the point where we didn't have to close it. And those hundreds of thousands of dollars that we spent, at the end of the day, we still had an old jail. And so one of the most serious issues we had was overcrowding. So what happened with us is that if we brought 20 prisoners in the door in a day, we had to open the back door and let 20 prisoners out. And however many we brought in the front door, we had to let equal amount out the back door so that we did not exceed what our maximum capacity for that jail was.
And that was done with the judges in partnership?
Yes, the judges would monitor us. And if we didn't do it, we were fined $750 a day per person that we didn't let out to make that cut of our head count. And so it was an extremely difficult process. Well, it also raised our crime at the time, because what happened was the prisoners that were in there that we let out then became to realize we can commit certain crimes and we're not going to spend any time in jail. They're going to bring us in, process us, and put us back out the back door. Yeah. So we looked like a revolving door on a fancy motel. Yeah. Only we weren't a fancy motel.
Yeah.
And then we had to also make sure that we monitored that and reported it on a twice-a-day basis to include the head count, the meals that we served, because you had to have so many hot ones, so many cold ones, and they had to have a specific calorie count. So when I say they were specific right down to the meals and how many calories in each meal, to include hydration like water, Kool-Aid, juice, coffee, etc. All of it was monitored. And this went on, believe it or not, for 30 years.
Wow, 30 years. Twice
30
a day
years.
reporting for 30 years.
30 years. And at the end of the day, our bill for the federal attorneys and the federal inspectors was $750,000. So, and none of that now was for brick and mortar. That was just for the inspections and being monitored by the federal government. And the
Wow.
federal government came in and ordered us to build a new jail. They gave us a time limit on when it had to be built, and they gave us specific instructions on how it had to be built. So, for example, you have beds in a dormitory. They had to be so many feet apart, and you could only have so many of them in each dormitory. They were specific on having a medical facility. They were specific on having facilities that the inmates could have private visitation with attorneys. And that list went on and on and on and on. It was, if my memory serves me correct, 66 pages.
Wow.
With, I think it was.
On your side, you must have had people whose full-time job was just complying with the order.
Oh, absolutely. We had a full correctional facility staff, and we had probably 10 people that their job was specifically to monitor these orders and make sure that we were in compliance.
Wow.
To make sure we monitored the building of it. And, you know, the sheriff at the time, and I said this to Sheriff Saarinen as well, you know, Sheriff Saarinen and the sheriff at the time in Monroe County, we wanted to build a Motel 6. The federal government wanted us to build a Marriott. There's an expense that comes along with it, but it wasn't up to us. It wasn't in our control. It wasn't in the citizens or the voters' control. It was in the control of the federal government.
And that came about because of the lost lawsuit.
Yes, because of the lawsuit.
So
And the sheriff prior to me, I'm not sure why he let it keep going and going and going. I don't know the answer to that. But as soon as I became sheriff, I addressed it immediately, and I took my attorneys and my staff up to Miami, and sat down with the attorneys from the federal government, and I told them this is coming to an end. So you tell me specifically what it is that we have to do that we're not doing that you want us to do, and you give me a checkoff list. We'll do that checkoff list right to the T. Then you come and inspect us, and then we're going to be done.
Wow.
And we're also not going to spend $750,000 for paying for your fees. So we need to negotiate that as well too. And I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I read some newspaper article, I guess, said I negotiated it down to $166,000. But that's still $166,000 just thrown out the door. We got nothing more.
Right. So before the consent decree, before the lawsuit, the jail was operating. Presumably they had regular inspections. Were you passing your inspections before the lawsuit?
Well, we weren't. And that was our first clue that we had serious issues. Excuse me. So, my apologies. So we knew that we had issues, and we had gone to the county commission about building a new jail. But they at the time said, hey, look, we don't have the money to do that. And we said, well, okay, we understand that, but we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just trying to keep the doors open on this. And at the end of the day, excuse me, we still have an old jail.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're facing the inevitable. And every time we wait, the price tag of that new jail goes up exponentially.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. We kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then the federal government came in and said, we're going to help you with this. The wait is over.
Because somebody saw an opportunity in filing a lawsuit, right? I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially with a jail your size, there were plenty of people who thought, well, here's a way to get out of where I am, which I don't like where I am. And here's a way to get out of it is to file a lawsuit.
Exactly. And if memory serves me correct, at that time, I think our head count was 350. And it was an old Texas style jail, just like Houghton County's, by the way, with the bars. And we were at 300, 350 on a daily head count. and our top was supposed to be 196.
Oof.
And
So you
the
had to
working,
sleep on the floor or?
oh yeah, we had what we called boats, which looked like a canoe that we'd put like a blow up mattress in it, and we'd put them in that and on the floor in with another bunch of inmates.
Yeah,
The conditions were horrible. And as I've said to you and the sheriff many times in the past, you got to really focus in on this, that whatever conditions you subject the inmates to, those horrible conditions, your employees are subject to the exact same conditions
right.
and the same problems with, sicknesses and disease and everything within those conditions. Well, that's what you're subjecting your employees to. So when we
Right.
talk about improving this and making it better, and some people they'll say, hey, they're inmates, they shouldn't be in there in the first place. Well, the correctional people and the deputies have to work there too.
Right.
They shouldn't be subjected to those kind of conditions.
And those cramped, bunking position situations, that must also lead to some bad behavior on the part of the people sometimes, right?
My God, we had more illnesses, and every day you went to work in that jail, it wasn't, were you going to be in a fight? It's how many fights were you going to be in? We had fights every single day of the week. We had them in the morning, we had them in the afternoon, and we had them in the evening, every day of the week. And of course, again, whatever the inmate is subject to, so are the correctional officers who have to go into those cell blocks and deal with that. And of
Right.
course, many of them were injured in those fights because you're in cramped, small conditions fighting.
Right. Yeah, so you mentioned that the federal overseers of the consent decree, they were making the decisions. The people of Monroe County, the employees of Monroe County, the elected officials, nobody was making the decisions. It was being made by the federal oversight. And then the bills must be paid as well. So how was the county, who considered themselves unable to build a new jail, how did they pay for all of this oversight?
I don't really remember if they, floated a bond or raised a tax, or it's been so long ago in my life and I haven't had a lot of thought into that now because I'm in a different game now. But I don't really remember exactly how they did that, but they had to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't get to put it up for a vote, and the taxpayers could say, "Well, no, we're not voting for that," because it wasn't up to them. It
So
wasn't
the
up.
bills for the jail got paid first, and
Yes,
everything else that the county did got paid second.
yes, yes, yes.
Unless they figured out how to have more money.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, it affected the rest of our operations within the sheriff's office as well, because we didn't have the money to increase personnel or hire new deputies or give raises or do anything because the money had to go to the jail.
Yeah.
At the time, our population was increasing, so we needed more people. We needed more help, but we couldn't do it.
So after this was all over, I wonder if you remember, I suppose that the capacity was met because that would have been the purpose behind all this. So you had a larger facility so that you didn't have to have that revolving door situation anymore?
Yes, we built. In fact, we built it even larger than what our head counts were at the time, which was around the 350 area. And we built it. It was a dormitory setting type facility, so we built even extra dorms, and it was a good thing that we did because I think our head count today runs probably over 500, 550, 600, somewhere around there.
That part of Florida has a lot of drug traffic coming in. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
We certainly were an area with a lot of drugs.
So just to be clear to those listening, it's not that you wanted a bigger jail. Those were also decisions made by the consent decree people from the federal government. But it turned out in your case that because of rising crime, that was the right number.
Well, exactly, and they obviously the federal government took a look at our numbers, both crime and population, and looked at how all of it was increasing. And so they said that you can go ahead and build it even larger than today's head count because obviously in the future you're going to need it.
Yeah.
And once you build the jail, you built it. So if you build it and you can only hold 350, but you got 700 coming in the door, again you're back to the revolving door. You've got a problem. And so
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
those have to be taken into consideration, which I know Houghton County has done all those studies, which is a good thing and very important. And I think what's really good about your process in Houghton County and the fabulous job that you and the sheriff and others are doing, including the county commission, is that this is a very honest, transparent process. And you're fortunate and lucky that you get to have that. We
Yeah.
did.
Right, exactly. And that is what motivates us. We want the voters of Houghton County to be the ones to decide this, but we also want to make the case that that impulse to kick the can down the road can be bypassed if we don't pass our inspections and if we lose a lawsuit and other misfortune befalls us, you know.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to remember with all of this is that, who wants a jail and better conditions for prisoners? Nobody. But you got to remember this: it's not up to the sheriff what the conditions of that jail. He's responsible for care, custody, and control. There are federal and state laws and Michigan jail model standards that he has to follow. Doesn't matter what his opinion is, if he likes it or doesn't like it or agrees with it, it doesn't matter. He has to do that. And if he doesn't, then he'll be in civil lawsuits himself.
Right.
And you got to remember this too: the majority of the prisoners in any county jail are innocent until proven guilty. They are not sentenced inmates, the majority. So they're just in there until they go to trial.
Right.
So they have certain rights also. And the
Right.
sheriff is responsible to make sure that their rights are adhered to. So even if you build a new jail, sheriff can't do anything he darn well pleases. There's laws that regulate that. And so, listen, you got to help the sheriff out here. He's got a problem, and we need the community to help the sheriff solve this problem. He can't do it on his own. Absolutely can't.
Right. Yeah, just for the benefit again of members of the audience who might not know, can you contrast, what a jail is compared to, say, a prison?
So a prison holds sentenced inmates that are sentenced to a year and a day or more. If it's under 1 year, you can spend your time in a county jail. But until you're actually sentenced, we don't know what it's going to be, because again, everybody has their rights and they have the right to be innocent until proven guilty. Rightfully so. That's what our Constitution in the United States of America is built on.
Right. Right. And so somebody who's waiting for trial for some reason, maybe because of appeals and things, might be in a county jail for a long time, actually. But that's just where they are while they're waiting for their trial. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
less than a year, right?
Oh, absolutely. I've had some folks that were not sentenced that were awaiting trial in big cases, like a murder case. They might be in there 2 or 3 years or more.
Right.
And again, you have to treat them different than a sentenced inmate at a prison.
Right. Because they have the presumption of innocence.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Yeah. And then can you comment a little bit on this classification issue that comes up and how those who are incarcerated in the jail have to be segregated under certain classifications?
So let's start first with juveniles, especially, and females. They have to be out of the sight and sound of the other inmates, of the male inmates. And so that obviously adds some issues. And obviously, you don't want the females housed with the males or juveniles housed with the males. So that's a whole process that needs to be dealt with, whether you agree with it or like it or not. That's just how it is. And even within classifications, if you're doing it right, you can't put somebody who was arrested for DUI, you shouldn't, in with somebody who's a violent offender, perhaps in there for murder. When you do proper classifications, that's not how it's supposed to work.
Right.
You have to separate them and segregate them.
Right. And so that sometimes means that the jail will have, available beds. But if you have a woman who's accused of murder, she has to be segregated into a special place. And maybe if she weren't, if we didn't have her, she could be in with 5 other inmates for us, for instance.
Absolutely, yes.
Depending on what kind of spaces they have and how many they house, you can end up with empty beds.
Well, you could. You absolutely could. And again, it's based off of proper classification in accordance to sex and gender and the crime committed. And you just don't throw them all in and wish them all good luck. It just it's not supposed to work that way.
That's right. Well, I think this has gone really well, Sheriff, and I think we've given the folks who are watching a nice view of what the issues are when one has a jail and when it becomes overcrowded. So I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to come and visit with us, and both previously when you met with the jail committee and also now on this video program. So thank you very much, Sheriff.
You're absolutely welcome. Let me give you here more about my background. So I did 35 years with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. I retired as the sheriff. I've been in law enforcement now for 45 years. I hate to admit that, but it's been 45 years. And I have a master's degree in criminal justice to include corrections. I worked in and around corrections, running the jail, obviously, as a sheriff. And so I know this process. I've seen this process. And I've spent some time on the right side of the bars at the Houghton County Jail. And so I know their process. And I always come up there. I always came up and visited Sheriff Brian McLean. And I always come up and I visit with Sheriff Saarinen. I'm friends with them. Born and raised in Hancock, Michigan, and proud of it. I still own a home up there. So I'm an interested voter and taxpayer on this issue. And lastly is I'm not a hired gun. I'm not being paid for any of this. I'm not being compensated for any of this. I'm not a paid consultant. I'm not looking for any jobs at this point in my life. I'm not trying to get on with the sheriff's office. I don't have any reason for any of that other than to do what I think is right for Houghton County and its taxpayers and its citizens, so that they don't end up in the same predicament that I ended up in. And listen, we've got a really great sheriff, and we've been lucky in Houghton County. We've had good sheriffs, good, honest, hardworking, transparent, straightforward sheriffs, and that's what you have today. So listen, help the sheriff help you. He's trying to do the right thing, and he needs your help. And he cannot do this without you. So take care of him, because I assure you he's going to take care of you. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And
hello to all my people in Houghton County.
shout out, right? Well, it's a beautiful day here in Houghton County. The sky is blue, and I've got one of the few, it's not the only one, but I've got one of the few tulip magnolias in Houghton County, and it's right outside my window. So it is blooming today. Beautiful thing to watch.
Well, I'm a little worried. I own a house in Houghton County out on the lake. Man, the lake is really low right now, so I hope it comes up.
It is low. We need some rain, and we just had a weather warning come through about fire conditions, so that rain would help. But it is a beautiful sunny day. So
it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. So again, my name is Faith Morrison. I'm with the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country. To see more on this issue, please come to our website, which is lwvccmi.org. So League of Women Voters, Copper Country, Michigan. A link to this video will be on YouTube. This video will be on YouTube, and a link will be at that website. There are also other resource materials there, including a constantly updated, frequently asked questions page. So if you have questions, you can email them to us through our website. We will get the answer for you and put it up on our website, because as Sheriff Peryam pointed out, and as we hopefully point out to you as well, we want a transparent discussion of this issue. And if you have questions, don't hesitate. We can get you the answers. So thank you again to the sheriff, and also to Sheriff Saarinen, who helped us to arrange this. And please remember to look out for the millage when it is voted on, and you get a chance to weigh in for real. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.